When my son told me to stop meddling in his finances, I didn't argue. I printed out a single sheet of paper instead. When he saw what was on it, he went pale. That was the moment everything shifted. My name is Lyra Vaughn, and I'm a 64-year-old retired school teacher. I've spent my whole life doing things the right way. I worked hard. I saved. I raised 2 children who never went without. I gave without strings. I helped because I wanted to, not because anyone asked. But one Sunday afternoon at my son's house over coffee and pancakes, he looked me dead in the eyes and said something I'll never forget. "Mom, I think it's time you stop getting involved in our finances." There was no anger in his voice, no drama, just certainty, as if the decision had been made a long time ago, as if I'd been a problem he'd finally worked up the courage to fix. I held my cup a little tighter. It was ceramic, glazed blue, with a tiny chip in the handle. My grandson, Keon, had made it for me in art class. I stared at it while my son kept talking. He said things like, "It's not about the past," and "I'm a grown man now, I need to handle things myself." I smiled, nodded, and didn't say a word. Not because I agreed, but because something inside me had gone very still. A sort of quiet switch had flipped. It wasn't anger. It was recognition. Micah is my oldest. He's 38 now, with a wife, 2 kids, and a company he built from the ground up. Or so he says. I know better. I was there when the first client fell through. I was there when his mortgage application got denied, and I put my name on the line to secure the loan. I was the one who moved money from my retirement account to cover payroll the year he didn't turn a profit. He calls it support. I call it motherhood. And now, apparently, I was involved. Micah's wife, Elena, gave me a tight-lipped smile and said, "He's just trying to establish independence." I've always liked her, but in that moment it felt like I was being quietly escorted out of a life I helped build. I finished my brunch, kissed my grandkids on the forehead, and drove home in silence. When I walked into my house, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went to my desk, opened my drawer, and pulled out a manila folder I'd kept for years. It had everything in it. Investment accounts, property records, trust documents, copies of checks, loan agreements with my signature and no terms attached. Things I never waved in anyone's face but never forgot I had. I typed up a single page, clean, simple. A list of every financial asset with my name on it that had anything to do with Micah. It included the house he lived in, the trust that paid for his daughter's speech therapy, the silent partner loan that kept his company afloat. I printed it out and slid it into my bag. That night, I slept fine. Because when someone finally shows you how little they value your contribution, the only question left is, what happens when you take it away? Let me tell you what happened when I handed that paper to my son. He froze. Not just a little pause. He froze. Full stop. Like his entire world had tilted and he wasn't sure which direction was down anymore. "Mom," he whispered, his voice caught somewhere between confusion and panic. "What is this?" I said, "Don't worry. I'm not pulling the plug. I'm just taking my name off everything." Micah wasn't ready for that, but I was. I had been for years. So if you've ever been dismissed, pushed aside, or told to be quiet after years of giving your all, stick around. Because this isn't just a story about money. It's about knowing your worth and having the courage to walk away when someone forgets it. I was 42 when my husband Ray passed away. A heart attack on a quiet Tuesday morning. One minute, we were sitting in the kitchen talking about which paint color to use for the porch, and the next, I was alone in the emergency room, staring at a blank hallway holding his wallet and phone. Micah was 15 at the time. Nessa was only 10. We all had to grow up fast. That was the day I stopped depending on anyone but myself. I cut every unnecessary expense, took a second job tutoring in the evenings, and learned how to make $1 last. I read books on personal finance called Financial Advisors and started investing. Nothing big at first, but consistent. I opened a custodial Roth IRA for both kids. I didn't tell them about it then. It was just something I did quietly in the background while they lived their lives. I didn't want their future to be limited by what life took from us. Micah was always the confident one. From the time he could talk, he had opinions, loud ones. He questioned teachers, challenged curfews, and started selling custom t-shirts from our garage before he could legally drive. He had big dreams and the energy to chase them. After college, he bounced between jobs, marketing firms, freelance gigs. He was talented, but he couldn't stand being told what to do. Eventually, he said he was going to start his own agency. That was fine, but he didn't have the capital. He came to me one night, sat across the table, and said, "I just need someone who believes in me." I believed in him so much, I emptied half my retirement savings and wrote a check. I became a silent investor in Micah's business, though no one ever referred to me that way. He called it family support. I called it hope. When he got married, I offered to co-sign on their first home. The bank required it because his income was still inconsistent. I put up collateral, my own house. I remember standing in the bank signing papers while he smiled and talked about where the Christmas tree would go. And when the kids came, first Keon, then little Soraya, I stepped in with no hesitation. I paid for their preschool, covered emergency room visits, contributed to their 529 plans. I picked up the kids every Friday afternoon so Micah and Elena could have a date night. I stocked their fridge when COVID shut down his clients. I even paid his employees out of my portfolio in 2020 when his business almost went under. All of this I did without ever asking for control. I never brought it up during holidays, never held it over his head when we argued. I just kept doing what mothers do, building quietly, supporting steadily. In our family, I was the safe place. So when Micah told me to stop getting involved in our finances, it didn't sound like a boundary. It sounded like a dismissal. It said, "Your role is no longer needed. We'll take it from here. Please step aside." I didn't show it at the table, but later, standing in my kitchen, I felt it. It came not as a sharp pain, but a slow, cold realization that somewhere along the way my son had stopped seeing the value in what I gave, or worse, had never fully seen it at all. That Sunday after brunch, I called my daughter, Nessa. She's the one who never asks for anything. She lives in Oregon with her girlfriend and teaches high school counseling. She always says I did too much for Micah, but she never says it with bitterness, just quiet disappointment. I told her what he said, that he wanted me to stop being involved. She didn't pause. "You should," she said. "You should let him feel the weight of everything he thinks he's been carrying alone." I looked around my living room, the same house I'd bought with Ray, the same house I put up to help Micah buy his. There was a photo of him on the shelf, graduation cap, arms wide, me by his side. I remembered how proud I was that day. Not because of the degree, but because I thought he understood what it had taken to get him there. Now I wasn't so sure. So I went to the drawer where I kept my financial records, not to plan revenge, but to get clarity, to remind myself of what I'd done, what I'd risked, what I'd carried. Micah thought I was involved. He had no idea, but he was about to find out. I didn't bring up the conversation again. Micah thought I would. He called 2 days after brunch like nothing had happened, talking about a new client his team just landed and how excited he was to finally be in a position to refinance the house and put everything fully under our name. I stayed quiet. I let him talk. At the end of the call, he said, "Anyway, just wanted to loop you in. I'll send over some forms if anything needs your signature, but nothing major." Nothing major. The house he was living in had my name on the title. The down payment came from my mutual fund. The property taxes had been paid through my escrow account since year 2. I hadn't said a word about it in years, but I watched the numbers every January like clockwork. He had no idea, or maybe he did and thought I'd forgotten. I hadn't. I went through my records and began listing everything. I didn't want to exaggerate or make emotional assumptions. I wanted facts, cold, clear figures. Micah's business? The $42,000 initial loan came from my rollover IRA. His payroll during the first year? I paid that, quietly. He never asked how the money appeared. He was too busy calling himself a bootstrapper on LinkedIn. The house? Titled under Micah Vaughn and Lyra Vaughn, joint tenants with right of survivorship. That meant I legally owned half the property he was planning to refinance without telling me. The trust fund for the kids? That was me too. Funded with tax-free municipal bonds I'd started back when Soraya was born with a mild speech delay. That trust covered her therapy, her private preschool, and her current gymnastics classes. Everything he was standing on had my fingerprints under it. Still, I didn't say anything. I needed to know if this was truly ignorance or entitlement. That Friday, Elena called. She sounded nervous. "Lara, Micah mentioned he might need you to co-sign the new mortgage application just for formalities. Bank stuff." I asked what kind of refinance they were doing. She hesitated. I think he's trying to cash out some equity for expansion, a business thing. I thanked her for the call and hung up. Not angry, just clear. Micah wasn't just pushing me out. He was trying to pull capital from under my name and treat it like it was his. He wanted to grow his business using assets I provided while telling me to stop being involved. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at my old corkboard. It was covered in Post-its and timelines from when I used to lesson plan every night. I had color-coded markers for every subject. That's how I used to live. Prepare, teach, adjust, repeat. So I pulled out a yellow notepad and did what I'd always done. I made a plan. First, I listed every asset we were connected through: property, business equity, trusts, joint accounts. Then I contacted my estate attorney, Simone, and asked what it would take to legally withdraw from all shared ownerships without causing legal harm to the children or affecting my own retirement structure. Simone didn't ask many questions. She knew Micah. She'd been at my house for Thanksgiving years ago when I was drafting the original trust paperwork. "I was wondering when this was coming," she said. "You've been generous for too long." That weekend, I typed everything into one sheet. Not emotional language, just numbers, values, account names, and how each one was connected to Micah's business, home, or family structure. It was time he saw it all in one place. Nessa called again that Sunday. She had a way of calling at the right time without knowing why. "You okay?" she asked. "I will be," I said. She waited a moment, then said, "You don't have to carry it anymore, Mom. You already did your part." That stuck with me. I had done my part. And then some. Now I wanted my peace. But peace doesn't always come in silence. Sometimes it comes from finally speaking up in a way that can't be ignored. Micah didn't think I'd actually step away. He thought I'd continue quietly funding his life from the sidelines. He thought I'd always be available, always invisible. He had no idea that the woman he was trying to write out of the picture was the same one who drew the blueprint in the first place, and he was about to see the full picture, black and white on paper, with every dollar accounted for. Monday morning, I dropped off Keon and Soraya at school like I always did. Soraya handed me a picture she'd drawn in crayon, me standing next to a tall tree with hearts floating above my head. I kissed her on the cheek, smiled, and waved until they disappeared inside. Then I drove straight to Micah's office. I didn't call ahead. I didn't text. I walked through the glass door like any client would. His receptionist blinked when she saw me. "He's in a meeting," she said. I nodded. "I'll wait." 10 minutes later, Micah walked out of the conference room, a coffee in one hand, his phone in the other. He looked up, saw me, and slowed down mid-step. "Hey, Mom, what are you doing here?" I stood up and reached into my bag. I pulled out the printed sheet. One page, black and white, clear as daylight. I held it out to him without speaking. He took it and glanced at the title at the top. Active Financial Ties Between Lyra Vaughn and Micah Vaughn. He flipped through it once, then again, slower. Property title, Business Seed Capital, Emergency Payroll Bridge, Educational Trusts, Joint Accounts, Healthcare Contingencies, line by line, number by number. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a speech. I simply said, "You told me to stop getting involved. So I will. I'm starting the process to remove my name from everything." His eyes didn't blink. His jaw clenched just slightly. "Wait, what do you mean, everything?" "I've already spoken to Simone," I said. "The title transfer for the house will be yours to refinance or sell, but the equity portion I contributed will be coming out. The trust will be dissolved and restructured under Nessa's oversight. My portion of the business note will be retired, and the paperwork will be submitted to reflect that I am no longer a silent investor. I won't be contributing to payroll, school fees, or household expenses going forward. You'll receive formal letters for each step." He stared at the paper. Then he looked at me. "You're pulling out?" "I'm stepping back," I said. "You asked me to. I'm honoring that." He rubbed his forehead like he was trying to wake himself up from a nap he didn't mean to take. "Mom, I didn't mean it like this. You're misunderstanding." "No," I said. "I understand perfectly. You want space. You want full control. I support that. But full control comes with full responsibility, and that means I don't carry the weight anymore. You do." He tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. "You're serious." I'm not angry, Micah. I'm clear. There's a difference. He sat down in the chair behind him, still holding the paper. I watched him scan it one more time. Then he looked up like he was seeing me differently for the first time. I didn't know all of this. I didn't realize. You didn't want to know, I said. He nodded slowly, like someone coming out of anesthesia. Can we talk about this? We're talking now. Not like this. Not all at once. I'll leave the sheet with you, I said. Review it. Ask Simone if you need help understanding anything. He leaned back in his chair. Mom, you're really doing this? Yes. I don't think I can afford to lose all this right now. I let that sit in the air for a moment, not as a threat, but as truth. I've given everything I could give. I've been generous, available, patient, but I won't be invisible anymore. I won't be used without being acknowledged. His eyes softened. That's not what I was doing. I know, I said, but that's what it became. I stood to leave. He didn't try to stop me. As I walked out the door, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Light. Not because I'd let go of something, but because I'd finally handed it back. Micah had asked for independence. Now he would have it, and I would finally have peace. 3 days passed. I didn't hear from Micah. No calls, no texts, nothing from Elena either. Then Friday came. Late morning. I was repotting a few succulents on my back porch when I saw his car pull up. He didn't come to the front door. He walked around to the side gate and stood at the edge of the yard like he wasn't sure if he was welcome. I didn't say anything. I kept my hands in the soil, gently tucking in the roots of a jade plant. Mom, he said, finally. I looked up. He was holding the sheet I gave him, folded in half, creased like he'd read it over and over. I didn't know, he said. I didn't realize just how much was you. I wiped my hands on my apron. It was never about you realizing it. It was about you respecting it. There's a difference. He looked down. The words hit him. Not hard, just true. I showed the list to Elena, he said. She cried. She said she didn't know either. I nodded. Simone called, he added. She walked me through everything. The loan, the trust, the ownership agreements, all of it. I sat down in the chair next to my potting bench and took a sip of tea. He stayed standing. I don't know how to fix this, he said, but I don't want you to disappear from this, from everything. I looked up at him, really looked. For the first time, he wasn't posturing. He wasn't defending. He wasn't even apologizing yet. He was just stripped down, the way he hadn't been since he was a teenager after a school suspension he didn't want me to know about. I spoke carefully. Micah, I didn't want you to depend on me forever. I wanted to help you build something of your own. But at some point, it stopped being a partnership and started feeling like I was invisible. That's what hurts. I never meant to make you feel that way, he said. I just thought, I don't know what I thought. That I had things under control. That you'd always be there. I said, that's the problem. You stopped seeing what I was doing because you assumed it would always be done. He nodded, slowly. You're right. Then, for the first time in years, he sat beside me without reaching for his phone or checking his watch. He just sat there. I need your help, he said. Not your money, not your assets. I need your help to understand how you did it, how you managed all this, how you made it look so easy. It wasn't easy, I said. It was intentional. Every dollar had a purpose. Every risk was calculated. I planned for what I hoped you'd never need. And most of the time, you did. He leaned back, exhaled hard, and looked out over the yard. I don't want to lose what we built. Then take responsibility for it, I said, fully. Not just when it's convenient. If you want to own it, you have to respect how it got built. He turned to me, eyes glassy. I do. Now I do. There it was. Not just a moment of realization, but of maturity. He wasn't asking me to fund him anymore. He was asking to learn, to grow, to finally step into the role of builder, not just benefactor. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded envelope. I was going to bring you flowers, but this felt more honest, he said, handing it to me. Inside was a handwritten note. Thank you for building the foundation I've been walking on for years. I see it now, and I see you. With love, Micah. Below it was a notarized form, my name officially removed from the house title. I wanted you to have the choice, not the burden, he said. So this is yours. You can stay on, or not. I won't refinance without your consent, ever. I looked at the form, then at my son, really looked. For the first time, it felt like we were standing on even ground. I didn't need control, I didn't need revenge, I just needed acknowledgement. And I had it. We sat in silence for a while. Then he helped me repot the rest of my plants. A few weeks later, Micah invited me over for dinner. No agenda, no hidden requests, just family. Keon greeted me at the door with a big hug, Soraya right behind him, still wearing her leotard from gymnastics. Elena was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of chili. She looked tired but peaceful. Micah was setting the table. He didn't say much at first, just smiled, offered me tea, and made sure I had a chair at the head of the table. Not the far corner, not a side seat, the head. We ate together like we used to. No talk of spreadsheets, no mentions of refinancing or investments, just laughter, stories from the kids, and a quiet comfort I hadn't felt in a long time. After dinner, as we cleared the plates, Micah asked if I had a moment. He handed me a folder. Inside was a full transition plan. My name would be removed from every joint asset with safeguards in place for the grandchildren. A financial advisor had reviewed everything. Nothing was sloppy, nothing rushed. But at the back of the folder was a personal letter. Mom, this is me stepping up, not walking away, not cutting you out, just finally standing on my own. You gave me everything, and I don't want to keep taking without giving something back. I'm not asking for control. I'm asking for your trust that I can now carry what you once carried for all of us. I didn't cry. I just felt still, settled. That night, I drove home with the windows cracked, letting in the late spring air. I passed the bank where I co-signed his first business account, the old park where I used to take the kids on Sundays when Micah and Elena needed a break, and finally, I pulled into the driveway of the house I'd protected, leveraged, and almost risked for the sake of giving. And I felt something I hadn't let myself feel in years. Done. Not in a bitter way. Not with regret, but in the sense that a chapter had truly closed. Micah had finally seen me, not as a resource, not as a safety net, but as a woman, a mother, a person who carried weight and made choices and mattered. I took my name off everything, not to punish, but to restore balance. I gave my children wings, but I also built the runway, and now I was stepping off the tarmac to let them fly on their own. I tell this story not because I want sympathy or applause, but because I know there are others like me, parents, especially mothers, who give quietly for years, who fund dreams, carry burdens, and sacrifice security while being told to stay out of the way. To you, I say this: your value doesn't decrease because it goes unseen, but at some point it has to be known. And sometimes the only way people recognize your worth is when you step away and let them feel the difference. Micah and I are in a better place now, not because I held on, but because I let go. Not in anger, in love, in strength, in peace. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own journey or someone you love, take a moment and like this video. It helps more people find these stories. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to step back to finally be seen, or set a boundary that changed everything? And if you believe stories like this matter, stories about family, sacrifice, and finding your voice, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real emotional stories that remind us who we are, what we've been through, and how powerful it is to speak the truth. Thank you for being here. You matter. We'll see you in the next one.